Revision video, and today I'll be looking at circulating and blood vessels, which is for HL and SL. And just a reminder, this is a revision video. It is not full detail. You need to do extra work to support your own learning. To understand, why do we actually need a mass transport system? What is the purpose of the blood? Well, the purpose of the blood is that multicellular organisms have a low surface area to volume ratio, and parts of your body can be deep within inside, so you cannot rely on diffusion and of oxygen and nutrients alone. We need the following things to have a healthy body. So we need oxygen, nutrients, amino acids, fatty acids being delivered to all our cells, and the rapid removal of waste such as carbon dioxide. Diffusion would be across too large a distance, so it would not meet all the demands of the cells, and it would take a long time for it to happen. So what makes a good circulatory system? Well, a good circulatory system needs fluid to carry nutrients and oxygen around the body, a pump, which is obviously the heart creating pressure, gas exchange surfaces or exchange surfaces generally to allow materials in and out of the cell. And tubes need to carry the blood, and two circuits to allow the higher pressure to push the blood around the body. Organisms, however, only have a single circulatory system. So if we look at fish have their heart, the blood goes from the heart to the gills, directly then from the gills to the tissues, whereas humans or mammals have blood going from the heart to the lungs to pick up oxygen, and then an extra high force pump to push the blood at high pressures around the body. That is meaning then that the gills have to be able to adapt to higher pressures than the lungs would have to in our bodies, and they can withstand this pressure due to the fact that water is pushing inwards on the capillaries as well, preventing them from bursting. How are the blood vessels adapted to allow maximum blood to go through them more efficiently? Well, first of all, we'll start with the arteries. The arteries are adapted by having a thick muscular wall, a narrow lumen to maintain the high blood pressure, and that they move as they push blood away from the heart. The endothelium, which is the inner lining of the blood vessel, is highly folded, allowing it to stretch with pulses. It's also extremely smooth, reducing friction. And the elastic tissue effectively pushes inwards, which means that it maintains the pressure of the heart as a result. Now, in terms of the blood, obviously all arteries apart from the pulmonary artery carry oxygenated blood away from the heart. The pulmonary artery carries deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs. We then have arterioles, which are a smaller network of vessels splitting from arteries, and the muscles can be contracted in here, the circular muscles, to direct the blood to where you need it to go in your body. We then have the veins. Now, the veins, in comparison to the arteries, have a much wider lumen, which means lower pressure. They have a thinner muscular wall and thinner elastic tissue. They have valves which prevent backflow, and all the veins carry deoxygenated blood apart from the pulmonary vein, which carries oxygenated blood from the lungs back into the left-hand side of the heart. And then the capillaries are the exchange surface. Now, we'll go over those a bit more in a few moments, but capillaries, arterioles can branch into capillaries. This is the site of exchange. So we have them wrapped around our alveoli, we have them wrapped around our muscles. They are one cell thick and have a short diffusion pathway as a result. And we have networks of capillaries around things like muscles, and they are called capillary beds. So if we look at the arteries, we have a few key things you need to know. So first of all, the arteries have different layers. So first of all, you have the endothelium layer as usual. Then you have which is called the tunica intima, okay, which is this layer here. You then have the tunica media, which is the middle layer, and then you have the tunica externa, which is obviously the outer layer. So if we look at the externa outer layer first, this contains collagen fibers, elastic fibers. Okay, so the importance of the collagen fibers is that it is obviously a very strong protein. So the collagen fibers are tough, rope-like proteins with high tensile strength. These features make the artery strong enough to withstand the high pressure and variable blood pressures without bulging outwards, which is called an aneurysm or bursting. So obviously very, very important. In the tunica media, there is a lot of smooth muscle and elastic fibers. And elastic fibers make up about 50% of the artery walls, and basically when the pressure of the artery is pushing outwards, the elastic fibers can stretch, but when the pressure then subsides, the elastic fibers will recoil, pushing inwards, maintaining the high pressure of the artery. And it's where the fibers help reduce the amount of energy expended in transporting oxygen, which is really, really important. The muscle's job, and it is smooth muscle that is in this layer, is really important as well. So what this can do is it can contract, and obviously that will reduce the flow in that artery. So what we can use is hormones. We can direct the flow of blood to different areas at different times. So for example, if you release adrenaline, the blood will flow to the muscles and less to the digestive system. So that is really, really important. The inner layer, the tunica intima, is a very smooth single layer of cells called squamous epithelium cells, and this is really, really important to lower the friction of the blood flowing by, so it ensures that the high blood pressure is maintained. Some arteries obviously has elastic, and that is again just to help that recoil as important. The lumen is so narrow because that maintains the pressure of the blood flowing through it. So the key thing is when you're thinking about arteries, their pressure does go up and down. So the artery pressure rises when the ventricles are contracting, forcing new blood into the arteries, and then when the ventricles relax and no new blood's coming in, the artery pressure falls. The veins are really adapted as well. So the veins have a much wider lumen, as you can see in this diagram, and a much thinner layer of elastic and smooth muscles. And this is because of a few different reasons. The veins have lower pressure, so therefore there's lower risk of the veins from being damaged or bursting, and therefore you don't need that high level of elastic and smooth muscles, and definitely lack of less collagen. The muscles are not needed because they don't direct blood into any particular area of the body. They just go straight back to the heart. The pressure in the veins is a lot lower than the pressure in the in the arteries, and that is because of a couple of reasons, but mainly the volume of the lumen is much bigger, but also the distance from the heart. At this point, the blood has travelled through the arteries, spread out into the capillaries, and now it is coming back together into the veins. Pocket valves prevent backflow of blood. So you can see here the diagram. If the blood is flowing in the right direction, then the pocket valves open. But if the blood comes back due to low pressure, it gets caught in these flaps of the pocket valve, which fill blood, and it blocks the lumen of the vein. When blood flows to the heart's head, it opens and the blood can flow quickly. Now, muscle contractions do actually have a direct impact on the blood flow. So without the pressure, something needs to be forcing the blood in the right direction. And basically there are muscles around either side of the vein normally, so the skeletal muscles. And when you move, your skeletal muscles will contract. It'll make the muscles shorter and wider, which means it squeezes on the vein like a pump. This then forces the blood forward into the next part of the vein, and then when it relaxes, the pocket valves prevent the blood moving backwards. And we think about 80% of the blood in a person at rest is moving towards this way. Obviously, much more can happen during vigorous exercise. The other force that will return blood from the head to the veins is gravity, and gravity is obviously pulling the blood down from the head down back to the heart. area we need to look at is so the capillary is obviously the exchange site where things come in and out of the blood, and you should probably know by now it's made of one cell thick endothelium cells, which are flattened cells to decrease the diffusion distance. Example of where you find capillaries on the alveoli, where the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange with the atmosphere. So things about capillaries you need to know is why are the capillaries lumens about the same width as the red blood cell. So what we're saying here is if we have a red blood cell, let me just draw one for you, its width might be literally the same width as the capillary, so it can just about fit through. Now this will do a couple of things. It will slow down the movement of the red blood cells through the capillary, but it will also reduce the diffusion distance because the capillary will be the red blood cell will be touching the wall of the endothelium and therefore reducing that diffusion distance. By having huge numbers of capillaries at the exchange sites, such as in the alveoli, this provides a massive surface area which maximises the diffusion of materials in and out of the capillaries at the exchange site. And in terms of actually having the adaptation, the capillaries are obviously adapted by being one cell thick. So they have one layer of these epithelial cells that you can see here, okay, and obviously that means there is a reduced diffusion distance. Now this layer of cells also has a coating of extracellular fibrous proteins that are cross-linked to form a gel, and this gel is called the basement membrane. So what we're saying is effectively there is a load of cross-linked proteins like this which act as sort of like a mesh or a sieve, and that allows materials that are small to go through, but not macromolecules such as red blood cells or white blood cells. There are also pores between the epithelial cells, so the capillary wall is actually very, very permeable, and the pores allow part of the blood plasma, not the red blood cells, to leak out through the basement membrane, and this would then lead to something called a tissue fluid, which we'll look at if you do HL in the next video. Now in some capillaries, including the kidney, there is what we call a fenestrated capillary, and this is when there are greater numbers of large pores in the capillary wall. They allow large volumes of tissue fluid to be produced, which speeds up the exchange between the tissue cells and the blood. And in the kidneys, this is really important. In the glomerulus, which is the capillaries that allow materials to leave the blood and enter the kidney nephron, because it means you can produce large volumes of filtrate in the first stage of kidney urine production, which is essential in a process called ultrafiltration. What happens as you leave the heart, we said earlier, is the blood pressure goes up and down, but the blood pressure generally decreases. So you see this up and down rise. So as we said before, the up bit is when the ventricles are contracting, forcing new blood into the arteries, and then the down bit is when the ventricles relax. So ventricles contract, ventricles relax, ventricles contract, ventricles relax, ventricles contract, ventricles relax, ventricles contract, ventricles relax, ventricles contract, and ventricles relax. But as the distance increases from the heart, the pressure does start to drop. And that pressure then dropping is due to a couple of reasons, mainly the pressure as you go away from the heart. But the other reason is that the pressure is that the friction with the walls of the blood vessel is slowing the blood flow as well. So as we enter the capillaries, though, the volume of lumen that the blood has to go through significantly increases. So as we go from arteries, let me just change my colour of my pen, sorry. As we go from arteries to arterioles, because you suddenly have lots and lots of blood vessels, they might be smaller individually, but overall the volume increases, so the pressure significantly drops in the arterioles as they travel through that wider cross-sectional area. You can see it again, the pressure massively drops as you move away from the arteries, and the reason why is because the cross-sectional area increases. So you go from one big artery to lots and lots of small arterioles and capillaries, and that therefore means your volume and your cross-sectional area actually increases. So there's more space for the blood to travel through. Heart is a muscle, so you need to be aware of this itself. So whilst we talk about the blood vessels, etc., the heart is a muscle. It needs its own blood supply. So the blood flowing through the muscle does not actually, through the heart, does not actually supply the heart with oxygen. The heart has its own blood supply and its own artery called the coronary artery, which you can see here on the map, and it's showing you this bit here. It needs oxygen and glucose like other muscles do in order to respire. The heart is constantly contracting, and therefore it needs energy as a result for respiration. Without this energy, the heart cannot beat, and this oxygen and glucose is supplied with by the coronary artery. And if there's a blockage in this artery, often due to a buildup of cholesterol, that would then potentially lead to a heart attack when the heart doesn't get enough oxygen or glucose for its own respiration. This leads to coronary heart disease, so there's a buildup of fatty acids blocking or narrowing the arteries, less oxygen, less glucose gets to the heart cells, and the cells die. This is called cholesterol. There are other types of diseases that can happen as well, and we'll just go through some conditions now. So diseases of the heart and blood vessel will most likely be database questions in the exam. And you could be asked about an atheroma formation, which is when the arterial endothelium should be smooth and unbroken, but due to high blood pressure, it can get damaged, and that can then be fixed by the white blood cells. However, what happens is the cholesterol starts clumping together underneath that fixed lining. Over time, it builds up and it reduces the pressure, reduces the flow through the heart as a There's a disease called thrombosis, which is the formation of a blood clot, and it starts from atheroma again, which builds up and bursts through the endothelium lining, and the reduced flow again causes the cardiovascular diseases. Therefore, are very important. You need to understand that a myocardial infarction is a heart attack, and it's when they get the lack of oxygen to the respiring heart tissues, which damages the heart muscles and could cause chest pain, etc. And make sure to be aware that heart disease is obviously caused by many risk factors. The study of risk factors is called epidemiology, and heart disease is one of the two major causes of premature deaths in the world. And obviously there are things we can't help ourselves with, which such as hereditary and age, but things like obesity, inactive lifestyles, and smoking are the main contributors to heart disease.